Anthony, A-N-T-H-O...
Normal, Anthony.
O-N-Y?
Yeah.
Gotcha.
All right, let me know when you're ready.
I think we're just waiting for the stream and then we'll be good to go, Anthony. Thanks for talking to us. Appreciate it.
What?
And you said you've been here 2 months.
Tell me when to start. I'm ready.
Okay, so I'm just going to kick us off here. Therese with Housekeys Action Network Denver. We are here in front of the Denver Rescue Mission back there. And behind us, the Samaritan House. This is the epicenter of a lot of the houseless shelters in Denver. And we're here to speak about our survey of about 50 houseless people about cold weather shelter access, with a significant number of folks experiencing getting turned away and the lack of cold weather shelter access. So to kick us off, we're going to pass it over to Anthony, who's going to share some personal experience, and then we'll get into the data of our survey and report.
Anthony, you can stand up and they're pretty good.
Hey, I'm Anthony Johnston. I'm from Miami, Florida, and I've been homeless over there for like 7 years, 8 years. You know what I'm saying? Denver been good because this is the first shelter I got into. I was sleeping outside on the floor in Miami. Nobody was there for me. I never been to jail or prison. You know what I'm saying? And it's very sus over there, you know what I'm saying? But I was just sleeping outside on the floors, you know, and just made the decision to come over here because weed is legal too, you know what I'm saying? And I'm Rastafarian, and you know, I left, I got ATL just for a couple of days, and I was homeless last night, so it was kind of, you know, hard or whatever, but I got through it. I can handle it. You know what I'm saying? But you know, that's just my story, I guess, for the homelessness and everything like that.
Can you share? You were here in the cold. Talk about how you were telling me about in the cold this winter.
Oh yeah.
How you were trying to get into the
when
shelters.
when I first got to Denver, I was here for like a week. I mean, yeah, for the first week before I got into the shelter, it was snowing and I was sleeping outside. I was the only person outside, you know what I'm saying, basically. And I couldn't even sleep. You know, I just had clothes and it was snow and everything like that. And I didn't even go to sleep. I just walked around, you know what I'm saying? So, you know, it's hardcore, you know? You know what I'm saying?
Are you able to say, what did they tell you when you went to try to get inside the shelter? What was their response? Do you remember?
I never heard of the shelter. I was just at the bus station, and then some other Rastafarian dude came up to me and said, "Yo, they have a shelter. Hurry up, come." You know what I'm saying? I didn't know about it. I was just sitting there because it's too cold outside. You know what I'm saying? So, and yeah, that's how. Yeah, I appreciate that.
Thank you, Anthony. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
I'm gonna grab that mic from you.
Yeah. So.
Thank you very much.
So yeah, to speak then to some of the findings. So yeah, just a second here. Okay, to speak to some of the findings. We in January and February surveyed about 50 houseless people, 46 people, about experience trying to access cold weather shelter, and recommendations around that. From that, there was 76% of people we surveyed had been turned away. I'm sorry, backing up, my bad, I'm sorry, my brain is scattered. 76% of people had tried to access a cold weather day shelter. 79% had tried to access a cold weather night shelter. Of that, 50% have been turned away from a day shelter, told there's no space, you can't get in this day shelter, and 66% have been turned away from a night shelter. So to pause there, we're looking at 66% of people that were seeking shelter in the cold at night getting told, you can't stay here. Of that, 64%, the largest percent by far, were told that they were at capacity. The reason they were told that they couldn't stay because they were told there's no room. They're at capacity. That's the number one reason. Other reasons include things like that the shelter staff were being hateful, that they weren't allowed in because they were trans, that they were DNR'd, or other reasons like that related to the rules, or issues with curfew, not getting there in time for the curfew. But overall, we're looking at about 66% of people that tried to access shelter getting turned away. We further asked folks about their experiences at the shelters. There was a wide variety of folks expressing issues with the staff, with other guests, things with just not wanting to be around that many people, as well as issues brought up around hygiene, issues brought up around accessibility, location, and so on. There was a question about travel, where we asked folks how long it took them to get to one of these shelters. In that, there was the average time was 1.7 hours that it took people to get to the shelter. The number one mode of transportation was walking. Second to that was city buses, but only a small percent of people were actually using city buses that were made specifically for shelter transport. So primarily people were walking and sometimes taking the bus, and spending upwards of over an hour or even much longer to get to these shelters. Another important fact, to jump back to the access to the cold weather shelters, we asked folks when they were turned away and couldn't get into a cold weather shelter, what did they do? And in that, at least 73% of people specified about staying outdoors. Others added other specifications, not about where they stood, but about saying that they felt suicidal or that they were heartbroken, that they couldn't sleep, comments like that. But 73% stayed outdoors because of not being able to get into a cold weather shelter. That include people talking about, riding buses all night, as has been talked about using trash bags to stay warm and the like. I think, I'll pass it over to my colleagues to kind of add more stories or more direct experience, and then we can close out with some of the recommendations for what this means. Oh, actually, but I'm sorry, my brain is scattered. I'm sorry. I'm going to add one more critical piece of data before doing that. Excuse me, and that is to speak to the city shelter data. So we also asked the city for data about shelter use and capacity. And we got that data from the city, and what it shows is that between the beginning of October and the end of January, 67% of nights, the shelters were over capacity. 67% of the nights. That means that shelters are either shoving people in corners and nooks and crannies and hallways without any mats or beds or blankets, or just flat out turning people away, telling people there's no room. And that's 67% of the nights. In addition to that, we got data from the cold weather shelters that are specifically for when it's under 20 degrees. And in those shelters, there was between 217 and 450 something houseless individuals that were accessing those shelters. So that means those individuals are folks that are seeking shelter that otherwise don't have a place unless those extra shelters are opened up, which are only opened up at 20 degrees. So I'm gonna pass it over to, I think, Anna, and then if Jerry wants to add anything, and then I'll close it out with the recommendations. So thank you.
Hi, my name's Anna Lilith with Housekeys Action Network Denver. I'm formerly unhoused, 12 years on and off, and I have spent very many nights out on these streets, and I have been turned away from these shelters on multiple occasions. That one in particular right behind us, the rescue mission, has turned me away on multiple occasions when I was out in the middle of a snowstorm due to capacity, due to curfew. I have actually been told in the middle of a blazing blizzard that I could not come in because it was past curfew. I have actually been where I had learned a system that if you call Denver non-emergency and ask them to have a officer take you to the shelter cannot refuse you. But in lieu of that, and this is in another big snowstorm, I had to walk out in front of my work, be handcuffed, and put in the back of a police car just so I could access shelter overnight in a snowstorm after work. This has happened to countless people over and over again. Every night we see people who are being out on these streets who have been said they have reached to a shelter and been turned away. Even when the city has opened their warming centers, it is not anywhere near enough. We only have warming shelters in the northeast part of Denver. Where are the people in south, west, east Denver supposed to go? I'm talking when you live somewhere like South Denver most of your time and you finally realize you need to go inside because it's that cold, that's a 2-hour trip with all of your belongings to hope that they don't turn you away because they are at capacity. The hope that it's one of the 24-hour ones, or that they don't turn you away because you have too many belongings. These are all things that happen. We've seen people be turned away because of the fact of their disabilities. They say they cannot be able to take care of themselves. Sent back out into the cold, the freezing cold, because they cannot take care of themselves due to a disability. People in wheelchairs, this is not right, and Denver needs to step up. They need to step up now. It's May, it's warm, we have 4 months to get a regular, comprehensive plan to be able to have everyone who needs to go indoors when they need to, when it is freezing cold outside. That's all I've got.
My name is Jerry Burton, Jerryburton. I'm with Housekeys Action Network Denver, and I'm also a veteran. I'm taking you back. This is about the cold weather shelter. You could spend $247 million, and you do not open up a warming shelter, or the one you do open up that people can't access them. Something's wrong. You know, it's time to start doing right. I mean, when you're doing wrong, you ain't got but one other way to go, and that's by doing right. I'm just gonna say like that. I tried to access when I was out here living. I tried to access the warming shelter, and I could not. So I got smart. I went and bought me a heater. That's why I never went. That's why I wouldn't go nowhere. But I've been caught in snowstorm after snowstorm, 4 feet, tent covered in snow. We even got swept on the blizzard night. So the only thing else I got to say is this. It's time for Denver to quit spending this money on useless things that is not working. And when you continue to give the same people the same money and the problems still go up, that's insanity. That's insanity. So we need to change some tactics here. We need to start taking care of people. I don't care if we save one person. We'll save a person's life that night, or in many nights. So with that being said, I'm going to let the mic drop. Thank you, guys. This belongs to her? Oh, yeah. Okay. Are you going to say something else?
Yeah, we're going to add up.
I don't know where you put it.
Yeah, there you go. Thank you.
Okay, so yeah, just to close us out with some of the recommendations, we do have a report that details the survey, all of our findings, as well as the city data, as well as 3 specific stories of times when we were helping houseless folks try to get into cold weather shelter this winter and could not. Those folks were denied, were not allowed to get into any shelters in the cold, even in one instance with the assistance of the mayor's office. trying to advocate still could not find a space in a shelter on a cold night. So those stories are detailed out in our report. And in conclusion, we are asking, as has kind of been mentioned, that action be taken now, and that action involves needing to have enough cold weather shelter for all who are seeking that. That means admitting we do not have enough right now. Hundreds of people are getting turned away every night in the cold, forced onto the streets. That shelter needs to be enough. It needs to be fully adequate to meet the need. It also needs to be in locations that are actually accessible. It needs to be all across the city, so that, as has been mentioned, folks who are in South Denver, East Denver have an option to get there within a reasonable travel time. An hour and a half travel time is not a reasonable travel time when you're walking through the cold. It also needs to be 24 hours. It needs to get rid of curfews. It needs to be accessible 24 hours. If you're working until midnight, you still need to have an option to get into a shelter when it's cold. Regardless of what your work hours are, what your schedule is, those shelters need to be accessible 24/7. Also, they need to allow folks who are ATL, so folks who have been denied shelter, have been kicked out for some reason or another, need to be allowed into those shelters. And furthermore, the staffing needs to be addressed. As we heard from our survey, that was one of the top issues that folks brought up of why they don't go to these shelters or don't want to go to these shelters or bad experiences, is that there's conflict with staff, bad treatment by staff, and that is something that must be changed in order for folks to actually be able to utilize these spaces in a safe way. Also, a part of that involves so in addition to that, in terms of the cold weather shelter access, we need to be honest about the roughly 25% of folks that we surveyed that did not even try to access these shelters because it was not going to work for them, and they knew that. And they knew it was a better option for them to try to stay warm on the streets than try to get into these shelters. And for those folks, a number of the top reasons that folks give is, again, around staff issues and other guests. Things about being around a lot of people, that being around a lot of people in that kind of congregate environment does not work for them and will not be an option for them. And so in order to address that, we need hotel sheltering for cold weather nights. There needs to be options for people to go into an individual room and stay in a hotel room instead of freeze on the streets if they want that option. And that has to come tied with outreach, and that has to also come tied with stopping sweeps, and so that folks don't lose their property in a cold weather while they're going in to stay warm. And I think that's it. Am I forgetting anything?
It better be done by September.
Yes, so we're looking at a short amount of time here between May and really sometime in September when this needs to be worked out. We ask for action from the city. We ask for a prioritization, excuse me, of our funding for these sorts of emergency needs. If we have funding for things like pickleball and police, we have funding for emergency shelter. And also, there is ways we can open up space. There are folks who have been living in shelters, congregate shelters, for 1, 2, 5, 10 years. And shelters are called emergency shelters for a reason, but they're no longer functioning as emergency shelters. They're functioning as long-term residencies for people who have been living there for years because there is no housing options. If we instead prioritize putting those folks into actual housing, then our shelters can once again function more as emergency shelters instead of functioning as long-term residents for folks who have no other option but to live in shelters for years on end. So I think we are ready to close. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. And there's questions.
So the no freezing sweeps bill was not passed successfully. And I know folks in City Council and the mayor were saying that they'd be willing to like work on something that makes more sense to them before the next winter comes. And so I'm wondering if Housekeys Action Network has seen from the mayor's office or from the City Council any work being done to address not having freezing sweeps happen.
Let me comment on two aspects of that. One, and if others want to add, but so there was two bills that we brought forward. One was the no freezing sweeps, and the second was about expanding cold weather shelter to be under 32 degrees instead of under 20. And regarding that second bill about expanding cold weather shelter, the mayor killed it by saying that he was going to run a pilot project that was going to test whether there was need for this kind of cold weather shelter, and that based on that, there could be a sort of, temporary location that's set up for that extended 32-degree time frame. Well, that pilot project, quote unquote, happened this winter. It happened for a week, and it was heavily utilized. No duh. There was hundreds of folks that used that cold weather shelter during that time frame. And as many issues as there was the case, it was a better option for a lot of folks because there was allowance for couples and so on. But the city has yet to analyze the results of that pilot, and so refuses to say whether that means that there is a need or not. Meanwhile, we have this shelter data, we have these stories, we have all of this survey data that tells us very clearly that there is a need, that there is a lack of shelter option space in the cold weather, and that it will be utilized when it is open. So regarding that, no action has happened past doing a pilot program for a week and then taking no further action. And then regarding freezing sweeps, I could say some things, but I don't know if anyone wants else to add. I think the question is is any action happen towards actually ending freezing sweeps, or towards a bill that would be palatable to council? And the answer is absolutely not. No action has happened, whether in council or whether in the mayor's office. There's no interest from the mayor's office in making that move forward. He never had any sort of intention to make that something that could be moved forward, because his reasons for denying it are basically carte blanche, that we should enforce the camping ban all the time, everywhere, regardless of the cold.
And also, I was just saying, who did you get this information, all this data you collected from this survey thing? You giving that to the mayor's office, or you give it to the city council, or who did you get the information?
So we presented it to city council today. We're hoping to present to host here soon, and we've sent it to the mayor's office, but don't have any specific presentation to the mayor's office.
That was this morning at 10:30.
Yeah. Did you want to add to it?
Always the right time.
I just want to also make another point out of what killed the no freezing sweeps bill. One of the things that was part of that was basically false data and falsehoods in general, being told that because of sweeping and freezing weather would stop people from wanting to go into these hotel shelters. That is the biggest load I've ever heard. That should have never even been said, especially said by a man who has never been houseless in his entire life. And literally, it's just falsehoods and false data to kill a bill that could have saved lives. And I'm sorry, if you really want the reason why people aren't going to the shelters, look at what's going on inside these shelters and why people aren't going. And that's why you won't get people who will go in there during even the cold temperatures. They're gross. They're dirty. They're violent. I will also say one last thing. As a trans woman, you will not catch me dead in a congregate shelter. I will never step foot in one of these places again if I ever become homeless. That's all the less I can add on to that.
Is there anything else you wanted to add, or?
Did you have a couple more questions?
Okay.
Sorry. We're gonna.
Did the migrant sweep happen this morning?
That's complicated, but I will do my best to answer it. So, regarding the migrant encampment that was scheduled to be swept today, a lot of work has been done to push that those folks actually get the kind of resources that they are asking for. And some of those demands have been met and some of them have not been met. And so, yes, the folks have been, or are being, I should say, swept from that block. I cannot speak to the details of the current state of things because it's actively happening right now. My colleagues would be better at speaking to more of the details of what happened at this sweep. But what I can say is that the folks at that encampment were asking the city for specific demands in order to go into the shelters that the city was trying to make them go into. And again, some of those demands were met and some of them were not. And so some people have gone into those shelters and some people have not, based on the fact that they were very clear on what they needed in order for those to be accessible. Things regarding transportation for their kids to school, things regarding being able to cook food, things regarding shower access, and other types of issues with the shelters that was making it so that it was not worth them even going. So
it is ongoing.
It is ongoing, actively right now, unfolding as we speak.
And then one last quick question I have. I don't know, maybe it's not quick, but obviously, like, summer weather has its own problems with it, with people living outside, and so I'm curious. Obviously sweeps in the warm weather still happen too, so I'm just curious if, like, Housekeys Action Network has anything y'all want to, like, ask the mayor about, like, sweeps in the summertime and ways that, like, you'd like to see encampment supported during, like, warmer weather.
Yeah, does somebody else want to take this first? Or?
Well, if anything's like time pass, people tend to come outside in the summertime, and because they no longer want to give up their freedom when they have to be in the shelter at a certain time, and more likely, it get dark around here 8:30, 9 o'clock. Why do they have to come in at 5? And people are tired of giving up their freedom. People are tired of being mistreated. People are tired of doing the thing that they have to do, get to jump through hoop, just to have a place, a roof over their head that night. I feel that the sweeps is only going to get worse because you can't force people into a place they do not want to go. You can't force people into a bad situation where they can cost them their lives. You can't force people to do something that you want them to do or the citizen of Denver want them to do, mainly the rich. So we got to come up with a better plan, and the better plan is housing first. All this micro community, it could be done right, but it has an end date. It has an end date. Why? Because of the city is not going to continue to pour that money down now. Now, for the migrants is, you have to take care of a homeless person, regardless of their status. And like I said once before, they put the migrants in the same position that they put my people in, and that is putting them out there in the street to fend for themselves with no economic base. How can you have an economic base when you're not allowed to work? How can you not work and try to find a place? Ain't nobody gonna give you a place. So with that being said, I'm just saying the streets are gonna get worse because people, as the weather warm up, people are gonna come out because they don't want to be in at 9 o'clock or 7 o'clock or 5 o'clock. So it's gonna get worse. What I feel is what he's doing is throwing bad money behind good money behind bad ideas. That money that they are giving to some of these providers that could be used to house people. You heard me say 247 at first, $247 million. That's almost $250 million. That just last year alone. And so with that, it's ridiculous to continue to let these providers and these developers continue to use Denver for the money and not provide them with the necessities that we need here, and that is housing. We need to have people in housing. When you don't give a person a place that they would want to stay in, then this is what you get. You get this, and sweeping money, just sweeping people. I guarantee you, if we once we break down this data, I guarantee you'll find out that this data shows that the majority of the homeless money going toward sweeping and policing and providing the other people with the that come out and put the maintenance worker putting up the fence. So other than that, it's gonna get worse. Is there any other question?
I think Anna's going to add on.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
As to the sweeps and everything coming this summer, the best thing that the mayor can do, for one, is, well, not sweep, but two, stop sweeping with nowhere to go. And what happened at 8th and Navajo easily could have been prevented in the first place had he fulfilled his promise of making bathrooms and trash pickup accessible. And then when clearing that encampment, the constant police harassment since then, you're taking people, throwing them in jail, trashing their belongings. This is summertime. You need a tent. If there's not hotel rooms, there's not micro communities to go to, you need a tent to sit in. You need something with shade. Or you're going to have the same problem that you do in the wintertime. People are going to get overheated, have problems with the heat, people with respiratory issues. So instead of sweeping them without these hotels like it was promised, give them the bathrooms, give them trash service, the hygiene that they need, and give them services while they're stuck camping there till you can have open spaces to take them to at these hotels and micro communities. That way, the hygiene issues are gone, and I'm promising you, once you start letting a camp self-govern itself, it will self-govern itself correctly. Most of this is all because of the fact that we are not providing any services to these people, but we also have nowhere to send them, nowhere to go. Even in the summertime, the congregate shelters are usually at capacity. So until we have somewhere for them to go, stop sweeping them and give them services.
And stop the mass arrest.
And the mass arrest. The mass arrest, especially for things like failure to appear on the most minor of tickets, is ridiculous. It's so much taxpayer money to jail somebody 24 hours for a simple trespassing ticket.
So an immediate demand regarding that is that the mayor stop using camping ban enforcement as an excuse to justify doing warrant checks that then lead to mass arrests of an entire encampment, which has been his practice, especially of late, going into an encampment or even a small group of anyone for camping ban enforcement, and then running warrants and arresting large groups of people in that encampment.
How many times would you say that's happened so far under Johnson?
Well, we can't say because it's constant, but we know of a number of very large instances recently where there was at least 10, 15 people that were arrested on these types of warrants.
And then to this area alone, we have heard of constant, just people sitting down, just trying to get some rest, sitting down in the daytime, literally being harassed. I've seen personally myself, six cops deep on the motorcycles, rushing through the alleys, harassing people, telling them they can't even sit down or take any moment to get some shade. If you look like you are in any way houseless, even with a backpack, they will roll up on you and start harassing you, them and set. Basically, they need to rein in this massive enforcement, or it's just going to make problems worse due to when you push people out of areas that have any kind of survival to them, you end up killing them.
Right, we're going to close there.
You're lucky you caught me this afternoon after I took my meds. That would have been so worthless.
Was there anything else you wanted to say or no? Is it?
Okay.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
But yeah, I mean, we could talk a lot more about the whole like policing situation right now. It's pretty off the charts, in terms of, especially after the especially after the hate the Maricopa sweep that I referred to. That whole those tickets. And there was one instance where there was